following right along with our agenda, is a special interest topic. I have Brianne Ogilvie, who is the Deputy Executive Director for Appeals Management. Brianne, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me okay and see my slides?
Great. I can hear you and we see your slides. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for having me today. I am Brianne Ogilvie from the Appeals Management Office within VBA, and I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about appeals modernization and RAMP. The purpose of this presentation today is to increase awareness about RAMP and appeals modernization so that CVEBs can do their own outreach within their communities to answer questions and share information about RAMP. As appeals modernization grows closer, it will be effective in February of 2019. As it grows closer, we expect more and more inquiries to come in, and we expect the interest to develop over time. Right now, RAMP is our pilot program for appeals modernization. I'll get into that in a minute. It's pretty much early access to the appeals modernization program. There's a lot of, as you can expect, appeals and the benefit system is very complex. That was part of the appeals modernization effort to make it less complex, but there's still a lot of questions out there, so hopefully this will clear up any confusion in case you're speaking to veterans in your communities and they have questions. So this has been the problem that VA has faced for quite a while. The appeals backlog was growing significantly over the last 17 years or so. The good news story out of this, and if you can call it a good news story at all, it's still not great at all. But between 2016 and 2017, we really leveled off. We haven't been increasing our inventory. But before that time, the inventory was increasing at a really high rate. Obviously, this is not good for anyone. It's not good for VA. It's not good for veterans. Veterans are waiting a very long time to get their appeals resolved. And as you can see, it's grown 350% from 2001 to 2017. So this was a problem that we needed a resolution for. This is what's going on with the current appeals process. It's too long and it's too complex. So right now, there's no defined endpoint or time frame. Most veterans are waiting on average 3 years for resolution of their appeal if they stay within VBA. The first stage of the appeal is within VBA, and then if they're not satisfied, they can appeal to the Board of Veterans Appeals in Washington, D.C. And those who choose to appeal to the board can wait on average 7 years for a decision, which is obviously unacceptable to everybody. This was a problem that Sloan Gibson, the former Deputy Secretary, had tasked a lot of stakeholders within VA, especially VBA and the Board of Veterans Appeals, to come together with important stakeholders like VSOs, private attorneys, people within VHA, and NCA to discuss how to reform the appeals system. They literally were locked in a room for over a week to sit together and discuss the best way to draft legislation that would be beneficial for all veterans. And I know a lot of veterans don't know this, but this is one of the unique aspects of this legislation is that VSOs were working side by side in drafting it. They had a lot of input into everything, which is why you'll see some of the features of the legislation, which are very veteran-friendly. They're all about choices for veterans. For example, right now, we have this system that's too long and too complex, and the only option for veterans is to file an appeal and wait until they get a decision. There's no options to go to a different lane or choose a different option in their appeal. But not every veteran's the same, and not every veteran's appeal is the same. Some veterans may need help from VA in gathering and developing their evidence. some veterans have all that evidence ready to go, and they just want decisions, and they want them in a timely manner. This new system gives veterans that choice, which is why it's really great for veterans. Now, this is a slide that when we give this presentation in person, we get a lot of laughs, but it's actually a pretty sad slide to me. This is what the VA appeals process looks like today. And this is what Congress has given us, so unfortunately, it's something that, you know, it started back in the 1930s, and it's just been growing into a monster ever since, and it's something that needed to be reformed. So the appeals churn, which what we call it, is represented by these tan boxes, and that's a period where veterans get a new decision because something has triggered, like new evidence has been submitted by the veteran, or VA had to obtain new evidence, and that triggers yet another decision that has to be created every single time new evidence is submitted. That's where we get a lot of the movement of appeals kind of shifting from one part of VA to another, and that's where veterans are finding their most frustration. But we have a duty by law to assist a veteran and to adjudicate any time new evidence comes into the record, and that's what's wrong, some of the systems that's wrong with the current program. We also, as you can see, the little circles with the arrows, that represents where I was mentioning the duty to assist, and you can see it throughout. It's something that is always triggered, whether a veteran really needs that duty to assist or not. So, as I mentioned, former DevSec Gibson tasked VA with coming up with a solution. The solution was the Appeals Improvement and Modernization Act, and it was passed in August of 2017 and signed by the President. So the new system, instead of having that one lane that every veteran has to sit through, they create 3 options for veterans, and a veteran has a choice on what's best for him or her. So the first one is a higher level review. This is when a veteran feels like there was a mistake made in the initial decision and wants someone with a little bit more experience to be looking at the decision to determine whether a mistake was made. There's also a supplemental claim. Veterans now, they may have more evidence that they need to submit. Once they got their decision, they understand, oh, I'm just missing this one element. I need to submit maybe an opinion from a doctor that really ties my disability to my service. They'll get that opportunity under the supplemental claim lane to submit that evidence. The appeal is now only with the board. Right now I mentioned there's 2 stages to the appeal. It's with VBA, the initial stage, and then it goes to the board if a veteran is still unsatisfied with the VBA stage and wants to pursue it at the board. Now the current appeal system will only be with the board, and the higher level review and supplemental claim will be considered claim work, and that will stay within VBA. So if a veteran files an appeal, they know to go to one location. Other clear up that confusion. So this is what the 3 lanes, and these are some of the features of it. So as I mentioned, there's the supplemental claim lane, and so VA will adjudicate the claim again if the veteran submits what we're calling new and relevant evidence. And there's an open record, so the veteran can keep submitting evidence during this time. Currently, in the current appeal system, there is an open record the entire time. Now, some people think that's a good thing, and sometimes that will just delay the case forever as a veteran submits more and more evidence, which I mentioned triggers that duty to assist and those adjudications, which can really, that's why you see things that are going to the board are taking 7 years on average to resolve. It's because of that, sometimes, of that open record. So with the supplemental claim lane, the veteran gets the benefit of that open record. They know that, hey, I have something to submit. I have something that will substantiate my claim. I have that piece of evidence. I'm going to submit that. And then VA will help them. The duty to assist applies. VA will help in gathering evidence, maybe scheduling for an exam, things like that. The really great thing about this new system, and this is something that when working with VSOs and attorneys and other representatives, veteran representatives, we found that the important thing to them was protecting that effective date of benefits. And what I mean by that is when a veteran is granted service connection for a disability, they get that back pay usually from the date that they filed the claim, because it's not their fault that, it's been in the system for years. So the effective date for benefits is always protected in the system. After a veteran gets a denial, if the veteran files within 1 year in a different lane and then finally does get a grant, that effective date is preserved from the first time the veteran filed. So that's really a great and unique thing about this system. So with the higher level review, like I said, that's really more like a review of the previous decision to see if there was an error made. And what we're offering with this is that veterans or their service representative can call and talk to a higher level reviewer over the phone with an informal conference to talk about the error in the prior decision, and really the representatives can really point out the error that they found and have that discussion with the higher level reviewer. Now this gives the higher level reviewer what we call de novo review, which means they get to review the record on their own and make their own opinion whether there was an error. They're not bound by anything that requires them to give deference to what the VA had already decided or anything like that. They get to make their own decision, and they have full difference of opinion authority. If they don't agree with that initial decision, they get to say so. This also creates what we call quality feedback loop. Now, with the open record currently, if the Board of Veterans Appeals or another stage in VBA overturned the decision, we never knew whether it was due to new evidence being submitted or whether there was an error in the previous decision. Now, with this closed record, with the higher level review lane, we know it's an error in the previous decision, and then we can target our training to our employees better. Now, the appeal lane that directly to the board also has 3 options there. They have a closed record with a timeliness goal, where those are supposed to be a more quick decision. And then the direct docket and the hearing docket give the option to have a board hearing before a judge for the hearing docket, and the evidence docket is the one where veterans can submit evidence to the board directly. Now, this is what the new process looks like, and I know that you can see how it's a much different process and a much more streamlined process than the previous one. One thing to mention, too, is that VBA, for their own, the higher level review and the supplemental claim, we have a 125-day average timeliness goal for those. That's something that we're working towards to make sure that veterans get a decision within 125 days, because we know that the timeliness is really important to them, and that's part of the reason why this legislation was passed, because we didn't want to go from 3 years and waiting for a decision and still keep that decision length, that decision time really long. We want to make sure that people are getting quicker decisions, and if they're unhappy with their decision, they can choose a different lane that's best for them. So there's no end really to the lanes they can choose. They can keep pursuing this in different lanes, but they can tailor it to what they actually need out of their claim or their appeal. So this is some of the benefits of the new system. It's more understandable to veterans. It has multiple review options instead of the review option that's basically just sit in line and wait. There's one of the great features about this new program, or the new legislation, is that there's improved notice requirements. So with the initial decision that a veteran gets, there'll be a detailed explanation with 7 specific points that are actually laid out in the legislation of what VA has to tell veterans about why their claim was denied, and what law was used to deny their claim, and what evidence they need to substantiate their claim, and just give them a lot of detail about what happened so that they can make the best decision possible about how to continue on if they'd like. Now, each lane has a clearly defined start and end point, which is really great. Now, in this system now, people kind of get lost, don't know what stage they're in. This one is you file in one lane, you get a decision, and then you get the opportunity for 1 year to file in a different lane and preserve that effective date. It also establishes that VBA is the claims agency and the Board of Veterans Appeals is the appeals agency, so it clears up confusion there. And it's good for veterans and it's good for VA. It should be a better and more efficient use of resources. So when this was passed, almost immediately, Secretary Shulkin was very interested in having us provide these benefits to veterans as soon as possible. So he tasked VBA with coming up with a pilot program and offering it to veterans as soon as we could. And that's where we came up with RAMP, which stands for the Rapid Appeals Modernization Program. It allows veterans to opt in early to the new appeals modernization law, and it also it started with an invitation only, but as of April 2nd, we've opened it up to any eligible veteran can opt into RAMP. And to be eligible, you have to have an appeal in one of the stages here. They have to have filed a notice of disagreement, a Form 9. They have to have gotten a letter from VBA saying it's been certified to the board, but the board hasn't sent any communication saying that they received it yet, or it has been remanded by the board back to VBA. So those are the stages, and if veterans aren't sure what stage they're in, they can always call the status line to determine it or talk to the representative. Or they can always just submit this form, and VA does its own analysis to determine if they're eligible or not, and they'll send a letter telling a veteran you're ineligible or you're eligible for RAMP. So these forms are on the benefits website on va.gov, and this QR code that's on there, make sure that this form goes directly to the Appeals Management Office so we can process this as quickly as possible. These are some of the benefits of RAMP, and a lot of them are just mirroring what the benefits of the Appeals Modernization Program is, but I'll quickly go through some of the ones that are unique to RAMP. So we have specific tracking in VBMS, which is our the way that we, our claim storage and workload manager within VBA. So we can track all the data on this and provide data to Congress and any VSOs who are interested in other stakeholders. We actually submit every 90 days a report to Congress about our progress with implementing the legislation, so that's stuff that we also add to that. So the rest is, like I said, pretty similar to what the Appeals Modernization is, so I'm not going to repeat that. But one thing that is unique to RAMP is that for supplemental claims, the veteran, when first opting in, the veteran does not have to provide that new and relevant evidence like they would in the normal system. They just have to submit a supplemental claim form, and we presume that they have new and relevant evidence because most of these appeals have been sitting around for a little while. So this is just some data about RAMP. We've mailed out over 200,000 invitations to veterans. We have an election rate of approximately 13%, and it's almost about 30,000 opt-ins. We actually have a little bit more because we have the unsolicited opt-ins as well. But as you can see, the interest in RAMP has been growing. When we started in November, we had about 3% interest, and even November has grown to almost 9%. Some months are well over 15 or 16% of opt-in rate, so that's really great news for us. Anyone who can opt in gets that benefit of the earlier and quicker decisions and the whole benefits of the new program. They get the benefit of the improved decision notice, and they also it helps VA too, because the longer we have to operate two systems, the old legacy system and the new system, it's going to take away time from focusing on one system. So these are a little bit more statistics that might be of interest to people. Right now, so we've awarded over $26 million in benefits out of RAMP, and there's been 35,000 appeals withdrawn. That represents about 30,000 veterans or so. Some have multiple appeals in the system. So these are some frequently asked questions, and I'll quickly go through them because I know that people will probably have questions, but this should answer a bunch of the questions that we've received over our outreach efforts and everything. So first one is, what if I have not received a RAMP notice letter? Can I opt in? As I mentioned, April 2nd, we opened up opt-in to everybody, and so you can use the publicly available opt-in form and send that in. Is RAMP faster than the current process? Of course. With the current process, it takes 3 to 7 years to get a decision. In RAMP, you can get one within an average of 125 days. Right now, we're averaging about 72 days to get people decisions, but that is growing a little bit because of the interest and the time it takes to train new staff on RAMP. We don't want to pull too many people onto RAMP and leave legacy, so we're doing that balance of workload, and it's a daily analysis that we do. So question 3 is, what will happen with my appeal if I choose not to participate in RAMP? Nothing. You'll stay in the legacy system. We're not, prioritizing RAMP over the legacy system. We're not holding appeals up. If someone gets an invitation, you just stay in the legacy system, but you don't get the benefits of the new system, which is something that would be too bad for veterans. Is there an NOD form for appealing a RAMP decision? Right now, RAMP is a lot of the features of the new legislation, to the extent that you can choose a higher level review or a supplemental claim. Within the first opt-in form, those are your only two choices. You only have the VBA lanes to choose from. After you get your decision, your RAMP decision, you will have the full range of options for a refiling if a veteran chooses. So a veteran can do a supplemental claim, a higher level review, or an appeal directly to the board at that point. If I participate in RAMP and withdraw my appeal, I would be going to the back of the line. Why should I start over? We get this question a lot, and I get that because, and this is why we're engaging with CVEBs, because a lot of veterans are very nervous about opting into RAMP, because by doing so, they have to actually withdraw their legacy appeal and opt into a new program. That's scary for people. I get that, especially if they've been waiting for 5 years. But what we would say is that not only, if you are waiting, you've been waiting for 5 years and you're just getting to the board, you're still not going to get your case heard for another 3 years or so. So in that time period, you could get multiple decisions from VBA and file an NOD to the board and be one of the first in line for their new dockets in the new system. So this is something that veterans don't really understand, but it's a great feature for opting into RAMP. Another question is, I have multiple appeals with multiple issues. Do I have to choose the same lane for all of them? In RAMP, they do. Every issue and every appeal is opted into one lane only. In the new legislation, a veteran will get to break up their issues and go down different lanes. And that only makes sense because it gives veterans those choices. Some issues may be more complex, some may need evidence, some may need just a higher review. So veterans get to make those choices of what's best for them. Why can't I elect the appeals lane and ramp? That's what I mentioned, that, you know, the initial opt-in, you can only do VBA lanes, but after that, you will have the full range of options. I'm representing a veteran in a higher-level review. If I request an informal conference, do I have to arrange for the veteran to attend the conference? No, the informal conference is supposed to be a conversation between the higher-level reviewer and the representative. If the representative isn't available or the representative, the veteran doesn't have a representative, obviously, you know, the conversation would be between the veteran and the higher-level reviewer. But this is an option. This is an optional component of the higher-level review. This is something that isn't required. So it's up to the veteran and the representative as to what's best for them. I received a recent decision from VA. I want to appeal my decision. May I elect ramp instead of filing an appeal? So right now, you normally have to have an established appeal, which is triggered by filing a notice of disagreement in VA system. But what we're doing is encouraging people to file the NOD and the ramp opt-in in the same package, and then we'll process them together to make sure that the NOD gets established and then it gets withdrawn as they opt into ramp. I know it's probably a little confusing, but the answer is essentially if people are getting their initial claims decision and they're unhappy with it and they want to opt into ramp, they just have to file a notice of disagreement and a ramp election form together. Will VA continue development on my appeal if I elect ramp? So yes, the development and the duty to assist and all that open record is in the supplemental claim lane. And that's the lane that the veteran should choose if they want additional development. Okay, so this is the last page of questions. What if I have a board or a DRO hearing pending? Can I opt in? Yes, usually they can opt in. It's no problem unless the appeal is actually physically at the board already. Then that means it's close to a board decision. So we don't have those opt-ins as a possibility because we don't want to take anyone out of the legacy process if they're close to receiving a decision. What do I do if I disagree with my ramp decision? Veterans, when they get their ramp decision, they get the benefit of the new system. They get all the information, they get the improved decision notice, they get all the information about what options they have, what the lanes are, and they will look at their decision notice and they will look at the lanes available to them and they can file in whatever lane they want. Is it true that the board won't decide my appeal of a ramp decision until after February 2019? No, the board will actually start deciding these appeals that have been queued up in their dockets in October of 2018. So they'll be taking those ramp refiles of appeals directly to the board. They'll start taking those in October 18, which is why we say you're not really jumping out of line. You're actually going to the front of the line if you get a ramp decision and you just choose to appeal that to the board. So that is my presentation, and I don't know if we want to go to questions or what. I'll turn that over to you guys to decide.
Hi, Brianne. I was on mute. Thank you for that information. I've been monitoring the chat box, and we don't have any questions for you at this time. So thank you very much for the information.
Yeah, no problem. Well, thank you very much for inviting me today.
Thank you.